Let me introduce myself. My name is Sarah Meyer. I'm in charge of content services at ESA, and I'm in charge in particular of the coordination of the projects at a high level and the development of the department. I come from event and project management. Before I joined ESA, I worked in the Solutions Congress in Hamburg. This is a little bit about my background. So what are we doing today? We're going to start with a short round of introduction of what we do here, and then Sheena will answer the question when it is really worthwhile to automate. And she will also present our top 3 criteria and give you some practical examples by showing you 2 customer examples. And then we will wrap it up with a short summary. So ESA is a service provider in e-commerce and has been for 20 years. Our focus is mainly on content. Here we offer all the services necessary for generating text content, like, for example, data management, also editing texts, and that is what we're talking about today, automated text generation with Semantics. And also visual content, photographs of products, etc., is something we can offer. And a milestone is our new majority owner of Sebion IT Solutions. Since the end of 2020, we also have a very strong partner in strategy and development now on board. So, Sheena, the floor is yours. Thank you, Sarah. My name is Sheena. I work for for ESA, and I'm an online editor in charge also of automated text generation. What I will talk about today are the criteria that we can apply in order to see whether automated text generation is worthwhile for a company. Now, we focused on these 3 top criteria. First of all, the budget. So what kind of a budget do I have? How much do I have? And is it enough or not? And the database, is my database appropriate in order to generate automated text? And also the size of my assortment, of my product range. For example, how many items do you need? How many articles do you need? Is 5 enough, or do you need 200 to make it worthwhile? And some other criteria, which I will not concentrate on, but you might imagine that this cross section of these 3 criteria, shows you where the journey can take you. When the budget is okay, your product range is okay, and the database, then you have then it is really worthwhile to start automated text generation. Now let me start with the first point, that is the budget. And before I enter into the details, I would like to show you an overview and some estimated values. Now, product descriptions. This is one of the most important topics and areas where automated text is used. So those are some estimations. Of course, there can be deviations. Those are just general values from our own projects we've been having. And we realize that when you manually generate text, so with text editing, per person day, PT is the person day, for simple products, could be a screw, could be any product you can imagine, we would say that approximately 50 per person day are possible when editing. And for a more complex product, like for example a TV set or a drilling machine, then we would say we can achieve up to 10 products a day, and the average would be 30 products per person day. And this is the average we usually refer to. In automated text generation, it's a little different. We don't look at the number of products, but rather how complex the texting is. So you can either have an easy text training. If you've already worked with Semantics, it's like 5 to 6 statements, simple text training we will need approximately 3 person days, and when it is more complex, approximately double as much, twice as much, so that would be 5 person days, and the average again would be 4 person days. Now, when you compare this, what you can see first of all is that the manual texts, there the effort goes up in a linear manner, and in automation, of course, it is entirely different. If you only have invest 1 or 2 person days, then you do not get any input whatsoever or output whatsoever because the text training is not there yet. So that's the minimum you need. But when it's simple or complex tests with 5 person days, then the amount is unlimited. And this is something that you can also see in this graph. That is that once you set up the text training, the costs depending on the number of items are linear, are constant, sorry. But for text editing, manual text editing, you know, the curve, or rather say the line goes up in a linear manner. And so this graph shows you more or less how many or what you get for your budget or how much budget you have to take into account in order to get a certain output, a certain performance. There is a seamless transition, so to speak, to the second topic, and that is the size of the product range. The line looks similar. It's the linear increase when with manual editing, and this green area is exactly the range where automation would be worthwhile. So we set up, starting with 3 person days, we could achieve a simple text training, and then we may assume in this case that it's worthwhile starting with 90 texts. And we said usually you have 4 person days for text trainings because we don't know if it's complex or difficult. And so the average would be as of 120 texts, it is worthwhile, or automation is worthwhile. Well, this is a little tricky, and that is the sustainable outlook. You, of course, have to know your product range because product ranges are different. These are some examples and only just estimated values to give you an example. So first of all, t-shirts. T-shirts is the most extreme example. In the field of fashion, you know, each season and each year is different. You get new t-shirts, you get new designs and looks. And then, of course, the new t-shirts also have to, you need text for that. So even though you only have a product range of 50 products in the beginning, in the next season, it'll double. Or after 2 years, it will be worthwhile. And then, of course, you would have a very high gain from automation in that example. There are other product ranges where this is not so clear, the increase is not that clear, like screws, for example, even though I'm not quite sure in how far the product range changes when you manufacture screws. But just as an example, we assume that the line doesn't go up that steeply, but sometimes they get new products, you know, every now and then, so it can also be worthwhile. And the absolute opposite of that is traffic signs, a product range which is rather static in its development. We simply assume that that traffic signs don't change that much in the course of time. I think over the past 50 years, we always had the same traffic signs in Germany. So no major changes there, and the product range thus stays more or less the same without any new releases, any novelties. So that the amount you have in the beginning will also be the amount in the future. When you have 80 traffic signs, I don't know, probably more than that, but say we have 80, just for the sake of this example, then we may say that it's not worthwhile because the minimum amount of 120 texts is not achieved because it stays static at 80 because no new traffic signs are created. On the other hand, this means that manual editing and texting might be more worthwhile. Now, the third criterion is the database. In Semantics, we work with data, so it's a data-bound solution, and thus it's an important topic. The first topic is the homogeneity of the product, our individual products. So either you have homogeneous products or individual products. Homogeneous might be smartphones. So the products have a processor. The speed of the processor is important. There will be attributes for the camera, the resolution of the camera, how high the resolution of the screen is, and such values. And so this is really easy for automated text training. Individual products, there it might be a little different. Example would be when you go into a thrift shop, for example, just an example, they have, teacups in all sizes and shapes, to give you an example. So, and also frames, picture frames, posters, so anything you can imagine. So that is, of course, more of a problem because when you have say, an old figure, for example, it might have attributes about the color, the shape of it. Is it a Halloween product, for example? And also other attribute, for example, the color. And for picture frames, it's a little different. For a picture frame, you would like to know the size of it and the size of the picture inside, etc. So these attributes are different, and you don't have the synergy. You can't combine the products in a way. So that is why we call it individual products. And the solution here would be to split it up if possible. Decoration figures, for example, individual products, that is entirely different from the example I mentioned before, like the smartphones. Now, the second question is, how high is the value? That might be completely different. There are products data which are well maintained, but there are other examples where with products where you find data or not, the data is not consistent. So some is more appropriate for automation, others not. We generally assume that when a set of data is of high quality, we can work well with it. If it is not, like for example, there are typos in it, in the texts or list errors, then it is not good for automation. But for manual editing, it might suffice. Smaller errors are not material, but there might be also a case where the data are insufficient or not available at all. And in this case, you have to define the attributes for the product before making the further steps. So, like, you have to invest half a person day to remedy and into the defects, etc. Or you also have to set up attributes for the entirely product range. This is something that we also offer. Apart from manual texting, also product adjustments. Now, what we've done now at ESA is we defined a couple of criteria and made a potential analysis. So we developed a system by means of which we can make a check, a test as to how far the data are suitable. With this check or test, we try to find out how good the data are and what the potential for improvement is. There are several criteria that we selected. For example, the possibility to mechanically read it, machine reading, is very important. Typically, the data are available as an Excel spreadsheet or in some automated format so that Semantics can read it and hand it over to us in a structured manner. But when you have a very long text, which can happen at times, a long text about a given product, which is not in an Excel spreadsheet, but maybe in Microsoft Word or in the CMS system, that makes it a little more complex. And there are also other features. I do not want to elaborate on each, but like a list separation or whether it's correctly written, or whether there are typos in it and so on. So what does the assessment look like? Here, for each competence, and this competence would be completeness of data, we have a scale from 1 to 4. And so this is a milestone. And when you reach, for example, 75% of the filling degree, you are graded into the scale, or 90%, etc. So this is a scale, a grading that we defined for ourselves. It would also be possible if you have your own grading to change the content depending on how you want to report. But we said completeness, the maximum scale would be 4 points, and below 75% it would only be 1 point. So this is an example of a database from the textile industry, an example which where you find errors in the system. This is a textile industry example, and the first problem is up here that it says item production. This is misleading. It's no good because it's about the material and the fabrics. So this is not really the right headline. And the second point is the separation in the list. The customer here works with a double slash to separate the data, and then with this BER, which was probably copy and paste mistake from HTML. So this is, of course, a little annoying because at Semantics, we want to tell the program exactly, how to read the data. And either you use a double slash or a comma, and when something else is in there, then of course it is not that practical, and this leaves some room for improvement. Next point is the percentage sign. It's a simple mistake. It's a typo, more or less, because here you have the percentage sign is attached to the 100, and this is a mistake. It's a typo. You can either solve it manually, and that will take a little longer, or else you make sure from the outset that the data is correct, that there are no typos in it. And then these this double W and the P01 2019 are probably values coming from some other attribute line item. I don't know, but it's not a material, and therefore it shouldn't be in there. So the program cannot process the information properly. Now let me come to the practical example to show you in which cases automation can be used and in which cases it's better to make manual text editing. A first example would be shop category texts here. I don't know if you can see it, but this is a customer this is a DIY market. The budget is limited. The product range and the number of texts was 70, so not really high. We just saw before the comparison 90 text, 120, 70 is rather a low number, and the database was incomplete, no database or incomplete database. And the products are very individual. First of all, you have the design floors and the vinyl floors or doors, house doors for a design floor. It's probably important whether it's slip proof or what the top material is and the color. But a house door, aluminium, the question is rather, what is the law? What locks do you use? How safe is it? And so on. So the data set is entirely different. And with a manual text editing, the shop texting is quite good. Our second example would be automated text. This is a textile discounter customer. Here top, in this case, a blouse top. The budget was very high, so that automated texting was possible. Also, a high amount of text, 386 texts, which is good and should suffice, as we've seen earlier on. Plus, of course, the seasonal text, which is typical for the fashion industry. So 386 is just a start. And maybe in the next season we will get another 300 texts. So very wide product range. And the database was also well maintained. Some minor adjustments were necessary, but overall automation was possible. And you see that also here in the product text you see on the left-hand side. This is a text which was automatically generated, and it works well. And some bullet points are in there because of this very good database. Now, at times, depending on the customer, it might be worthwhile for certain customers, both approaches might be suitable for different product ranges. To give you an example, when we take the two examples we had earlier on and combine that, it could be that, for instance, a DIY market, they want to have text for the various categories, to be very individual, and no databases available, and not so many categories, like 20 or 30 only, or 50. And a good solution would be manual text editing and for the categories, but for the sub-products like screws or what have you, which are probably more than 100, there it might make sense to use automated text generation if the database is suitable. Now I will come to my summary to wrap it up again, the most important points. So first of all, the budget is important. How much budget is available? Is it enough for automation to that complex degree? Or is it rather a smaller assignment where manual editing, text editing might be more suitable? How many texts do we want to produce at all? Is it worthwhile, the amount of text, or is it something that we could rather do manually? And the third point is, are the data suitable for automation, and how much work would it require to make the database fit for automation? So that was our reply to the question, when is automated text editing worthwhile? We are now happy to receive your questions and to start the discussion. I would like to share our contact data. If there are further questions after this webinar, I will also post it into the chat, or else you can also get in touch with AX Semantics if you like. Furthermore, we also have an exclusive offer for all the participants of the meetup. For all of you who are interested in testing, checking their data, your data, and you can get your individual quick chat. We will do that. We're happy to do that for you, free of charge. And we will use the criteria that we've just presented to you for a individual checkup, so to speak, and make an analysis of the potential in a comprehensive manner so that we can also see in how far it's worthwhile to automate your particular data. If you're interested, please send an email to us, to me or to Sheena. I will also write it into the chat in a minute. And the reference should be Meetup quick check, and then we'll get it back in touch with you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting, the criteria you presented. I've been doing this job for some years now. And I also have a couple of questions, looking forward to your answers. So, with your perspective and your list of criteria, do you rather have German customers? Because the translation costs might matter too. Or how do you take that into account when people say it's 120 or 386 products, like in your example, but I also would like to have it in English, French, and Italian? So how would you go about, and what do you think about that? What do you think about multilingual solutions? Basically, we often have German and English and also translation into German and or English. I would say 75%. So we would have to make an individual calculation whether this is also worthwhile or not. I assume that if it's worthwhile for English, it will probably also be worthwhile for other languages. But can you give us a value? Just a rough estimate? I have one, so I'm asking you, and maybe you have the same value. That would be good to know. I would say 75%-ish. That's my educated guess. So the translation will be easier than German? Yes, in a way, because you have synergy effects. You don't have to redo everything. I mean, it's of course some effort to make the translation, even in particular if you can't do that on your own and have to use a translator. We need support. This is of course some incremental effort, but basically the structure will remain the same. The preparatory work will be there. Everything will be in automation, you mean? Yes, that's right. Okay. Okay, that's right. That's what I thought. It gets cheaper. But I looked at it from the other side, whether you have a rough idea, but I agree. It's of course less effort to prepare it afterwards, also in English and in French. I appreciate the threshold you mentioned. You can build up automation in 3 to 4 days. That's really fantastic and quick. And therefore, you can also reach this threshold of 120. So from your perspective, and apart from the example you mentioned, what are typical things where you would say manual is better or automation is better? Or, and your strength is also hybrid. You offer both, don't you? You have the hybrid team on board. So a manual team, manual editing team, and a automated editing team. So what are examples of industries where you would not do automated texting at all, where automation is not worthwhile? We say we do that manually 100%. Are there any typical industries? If you ask me for one area where manual or automation are better, and that's really the distinction between homogeneous products are heterogeneous products. So when I see that it's a very heterogeneous task, where for each individual product or text you need a separate requirement, then it's, I get the red flag and I say there, manual texting is better. But when I see that the product range or the products or beta texts are very homogeneous and there are synergies, then of course it would be an example and a clear signal that there is a potential for automation. I think this is the basic distinction. In particular, for product descriptions, we oftentimes have product ranges which achieve this threshold value quickly. Okay, see what you mean. And it's really easy to, yeah, that's very clear. Thank you very much. You gave 2 examples with or without automation. So what was your experience with the customer? What were the expectations in the beginning? Were people happy with automation or rather reluctant? And did you have to convince your customers first of all? So there were different examples, honestly. There were customers who were absolutely enthusiastic about automation and they really wanted it. And so they absolutely subscribe to that idea, but there are other customers who are more reluctant and who rather want to have individual and customized solutions rather. So it really depends. So there are also people who were rather doubtful, skeptical, and they didn't go for the automated solution. Is that what you're saying? Well, I think overall, my experience was very positive. The texts are very good. The outcome and the results of our automated texting is very good. And when the database is good, and when somebody is there who can help, and then, of course, you will also get a good output in automation. And this is, but there are some customers who want an individual solution, a customized solutions, in particular for the shop categories or designer products. Where they want to have 200 words for each category, for example, or design product, they will probably want to stay with manual text editing. Yeah, when you create manual text, you still have that discussion with the customer. I mean, people who really are very, for whom quality is very important, even for M.88 screws, whatever, they will discuss with you anyway, whether it's an automated text or a manually edited text. I mean, I know this problem is there, but unfortunately, it's really true that there are difficult customers and others are not that difficult. But I would like to now read out 2 questions to you. If I have a database with product descriptions and keywords in 10 different languages, is it worthwhile to automate in all the languages, or shall I just do automation in the source language and then to have it translated afterwards? It's always better to start with the source language. First of all, we are German, so be it German, be it English, as a source language, you start with that. And it's easier basically to use that base and then get this feedback loop as the customer wants to know what they get and make some changes if necessary. So it would be good really to start with one source language, a source product, so to speak, and then you can have it translated into other languages. Yeah, I also think so. Start with one language and then roll it out with other languages. When the question is whether you should use DeepL or not, we had this meetup last week. Ecosys gave us excellent examples. For me, it was really interesting. Karina, maybe you can post this meetup in parallel. What was really good to see was that it was about auto car batteries, and the advantages of this battery are, Deeple said, The disadvantages of these batteries are, a clear mistake, and the link to the German manuals wasn't manually adjusted to the correct language version. So there had to be manual readjustments in the PDF. So people does make a lot of mistakes, and that the advantage is really in having a, using AX for translations. So are there any other questions from the audience? By the way, thanks to the to you, the two experts with your lines and your stable